Get started. I want to thank you and welcome all of you for coming to today's panel, Money, Power, Respect, on the NFL's dominant position in our sports landscape. This event marks the first year of the Center for Sports Media here at Seton Hall. And I want to say a special thank you to the faculty, to President Joe Nyer, Provost Katja Passerini, our cabinet members, our generous Seton Hall alumni, and the many, many students who have been a part of this incredible year. And what a year it's been. Some of you may remember last spring, it was just last spring when we had Alex Rodriguez here in small groups and big groups talking to everybody about sports and business. But since then, we've had a conversation with Billie Jean King and Alana Kloss at the University Center. We've had a gala celebration featuring Robin Roberts, which was just September, although it feels like a long time ago now, sitting here in April. We had a sports and spirituality conversation with the Institute for Communication and Religion, an ESPNW campus conversation, which included the athletic department. And we had a particularly well-timed panel with ESPN reporter TJ Quinn and WNBA player Elizabeth Williams on the fate of Brittany Griner. And the very next morning after that panel, Griner was freed from prison in Russia in a prisoner exchange. And those are just a few of the highlights, some of the work that we have going on right now. We're going to keep having timely conversations like that, and especially like this one, which will be led by our founder, Bob Lee, who many of you know from his incredible career at ESPN. Bob graduated in 1976 and has been a tireless Seton Hall advocate ever since, and I'm going to leave this conversation in his capable hands.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jane. Thank you all for being here and those who are watching online. If you're going to consume sports media, which puts you in the largest cohort in this country, or if you're going to work in sports media, there are critical thinking skills and observational and analytical skills you need to have. And hopefully, today's conversation will help you amp up your game in that regard to the National Football League. We're 2 days removed from the NFL draft, a major tentpole, certainly, in the 12-month reality of the NFL. We are just 3 days past from 5 NFL players being suspended for gambling infractions and less than 2 weeks removed from the impending sale of the Washington franchise being announced. You know, we live in these fractured media and cultural times, and the NFL is that rare cultural entity that can command a large and loyal audience of consumers here and to a growing extent overseas. So it's a starting point to think about how much hegemony, how much control, how much people around the country and the world watch the NFL. $18 billion in revenue. You've got the 31 individuals who own the franchises. And remember, the Packers are owned by stockholders. But the 31 owners of the league, they comprise a club more exclusive than the U.S. Senate or the College of Cardinals. Remember that line in the movie Concussion about the NFL? You're talking about a league that owns a day of the week. And in an age of social activism and legalized gambling, the NFL stands atop not only sports industries, but cultural institutions. What does that mean? We got a great group joining me today to talk about all of this. Our first panelist has been in his current position for 14 years at the NFL Players Association as their Director of External Affairs, in the room for critical moments, dealing firsthand with power brokers in the league, a major contributor to the Center's virtual panel on the infamous John Gruden emails 15 months ago. We are so fortunate he's joined us today here from Washington. Please welcome George Atallah. Thank you, George. Our next panelist has covered the National Football League for over a decade at the Washington Post, at Newsday as the Jets beat writer, Yahoo Sports, and ESPN. She brings all that experience to bear online and across various ESPN platforms, including Sunday NFL Countdown and First Take. Please, a Seton Hall welcome for Kimberley Martin. We are next joined by a gentleman who is a brand name in journalism. Nobody reports more deeply, interprets more cogently, and creates a more compelling narrative thread than this guy. He is a Jersey guy by birth. His work at the Miami Herald alone or the New York Times alone, where he won 2 Pulitzer Prizes, would be a career unto itself. But in the last 11 years since he's been at ESPN, he has considerably raised the bar there. Please say hello to Don Van Natta. And one of the great perks of the job I used to have was working with or just hanging out in the newsroom and having a cup of coffee with people who are objectively the best in the world at what they do. Our next panelist has 2 Super Bowl rings to prove that objectively. At my peril here in Jersey, I note that they are from the Patriots. However, he played 3 seasons with the New York Jets. Moreover, he is well respected now as the leading and thoughtful analyst of all matters around the NFL. Say hello to Damien Woody.
All right.
Thank you all for joining us. We'll have questions and answers coming along in a bit, and questions that have been submitted by folks in advance as well. Okay, so we all understand that the league is powerful, influential, has been so successful. Let's just take the last 10 years. In that regard, Jordan, let me begin with you. What are your observations? Was there a pivot point in the last decade or so that really convinced you we have really morphed into a different reality now with the size and the scope and the influence of the league?
I think in my 14 years here at the NFL Players Association, that became very evident at the very first event I attended, which was the NFL Draft in 2009. And I think when that was still at Radio City, you'd walk in, you'd see the crazy Jets fans in the stands, the energy was out of control, and you just understood that this was something much bigger than just a business that generated revenue, that this was the cultural epicenter or one of the cultural epicenters of the country. So that really resonated with me from almost the very first moments that I was on the quote-unquote job. I don't know that we have enough time to talk about pivotal moments in the last 10 years.
Does one jump out?
I'd say when the President of the United States gets involved in your business affairs, that probably
that rises
to a level.
Let's get those SOBs off the field from
Yes.
Donald Trump
Yeah,
in Birmingham,
I think
Alabama.
that probably
Yeah.
rises to the level of we're in a completely different stratosphere at this point, right? So I think that I would point to that as one of the biggest challenges professionally I've faced in my career.
Damien, what did you see, having played so recently and yet now covering the X's and O's, but also the cultural impact of the league? What said to you, wow, this is something new?
The TV revenue, it was like pouring gasoline on a fire because the product is already great. But it's the TV and the social media aspect. We're living in a kind of a microwave society. Everybody wants it now. They want it now. They don't want to wait. And so when you combine the social media, the TV revenue, and the fans just clamoring for just more football, it's been absolutely bananas. And I can just walk out here on the street, and people don't get enough of it. They just don't get enough of football. And over the last 10 years, obviously that coincides with the impact of social media and how social media has grown and how the league has adapted and the players have adapted. It seems like everything has just grown tenfold. It's a 24-hour situation as far as, football, sports.
12 months too, right?
Yeah, 12 months. There's no breaks.
Mm-hmm.
We have, everyone always asks me, like, okay, now the season's over, do you get to go on vacation, kick your feet up? No. Now I'm doing a Senior Bowl, I'm doing the draft, and that's what the NFL has done a great job of, is they've placed events every month. So unlike other sports where they kind of have a few months off, not in the National Football League, the NFL has done, and to their credit, strategically have placed events every single month to keep you engaged in the game of football.
At the schedule release. Think of that, just the schedule release.
We used to
now
call
is-
it agate type in newspapers, right? And the mere release of the schedule is a cultural event.
Is a massive event.
Well, not just the schedule release. I mean, everything from Super Bowl media night, like now it's a whole night, the combine, the draft, everything, the owners' meetings, it's all a production, and we're all there in attendance. I had a choice of covering, back when I first was offered a beat, I was told you could cover the Brooklyn Nets when they were moving to Brooklyn, you could cover the Jets, or you could cover the Mets. And I was like, baseball season's a little long. I think I'll just do the Jets. And it is a full, it's a 12-month year job. Like there is, to Damien's point, it doesn't stop. It really doesn't. And it's the best thing about the gig, and also the worst thing, because there's never a break. That's why I have my phone here, just in case Aaron Rodgers decides to get traded to the Jets any second.
So turning this into a 12-month enterprise, is that a result of the popularity? Which chicken or which egg, George, came first? Why is the league so popular? Because it's on all the time, or is it on all the time because it's so popular?
We were a $9 billion enterprise in 2009, 2010. We withstood 100 and whatever day lockout. And I think after that long-term deal was signed, we, in 2011, I mean, the dynamics of that collective bargaining agreement, essentially we hitched our wagons to the NFL owners making money, right? We did a revenue share deal, and I think from that point in 2011, when the Jerry Joneses of the world, the Robert Krafts of the world had a long enough runway, they know how to do one thing, ring the bell. And that's when I think you really saw the quote-unquote modern, we're going to make the combine a thing, to Kimberly's point, when the combine was barely a thing. I mean, we were reminiscing you were reminiscing, sorry, Bob, about the NFL draft and how it was a non-production until the NFL sort of, ESPN made it a production, and now it's just become this whole other thing where it's touring cities. So I think that 2011 labor piece, from my vantage point as a union executive, that led to, I think, the ability of the owners to do what they do best, make money.
Across the landscape of American sports and American culture, Don, how influential what is on a par with the NFL?
Nothing.
Even culturally, outside of sports, music, sports, religion.
I don't think there is anything. I think it's it's like cars in the 1950s. It's that big. It's embedded in the culture, and television is the main driving force, right? It really is.
We have this chart here for our audience. I mean, of the top 100 shows in 2022, 80-something are NFL broadcasts.
That's right, and that has made the revenue grow exponentially. I mean, $113 billion is the new television deal. It's just astronomical. The money just has tripled every single time, or more than that. And it's because people can't get enough football. It's an event. I talked to a top executive at the NBA. He said the NFL is way up here, we're down here. And they're about to sign.
In terms of not just money, but in terms of?
In terms of cultural influence, in terms of everything, in terms of just the hold it has on the American public, on the imagination. And it's every day people are thinking about the NFL. There is no off season. It's remarkable.
Now international.
And international
all the
growth
games that are right. You see, the games in Germany and London, and you realize in Mexico. It's like, this isn't just about the U.S. now. This is global. You've got go to other countries and fans are wearing Rams jerseys, or they're wearing Cleveland Browns jerseys, and you're just like, wow. You don't even think about the influence and the power that has overseas. And
the league is bulletproof. I mean, George said the sentence earlier that we withstood that 2011 lockout. The league withstands everything, every scandal.
Why?
Right, it's a Teflon league. I don't get it. The Ray Rice domestic violence suspension for only 2 games that Roger Goodell handed down. And I did those stories for ESPN in the fall of 2014. I was on OTL with you a lot. Goodell did not tell the truth repeatedly. It was the worst moment of his time.
He nearly lost his job in There was a 4-day period in 2014 when they were close to making a move.
And within a week or two, there were more games every Sunday, right, George? We've talked about this. It's this distraction. People moved on very, very quickly. But there have been so many scandals that they have just been able to withstand. Dan Snyder. They're going to survive Dan Snyder. Dan Snyder is going to survive Dan Snyder with
yeah.
$5 billion in cash. It's remarkable. And I don't know how they do it. I really don't. I don't know how they survive the kind of hits that they've taken, other than the fact that the game is just so popular and people just want football and look the other way or hold their nose at the scandals and don't let it bother them.
It's the product. It's the product. And I think the league understands that if we can just find our way to the games, even in the offseason, or find our way to another event, it'll all blow over because people are so obsessed with the game of football and everything it brings. Because I always, just talking with fans out there, everyone is always saying, I got all this stuff going on in my life. I just want to watch it. Watching the game just kind of takes me away from all the other stuff that's going on in my world at that time. I think the NFL banks on that. They feed into that.
But what about that period in 2017, 2016, Colin? Kaepernick is kneeling. The following season, it became an issue throughout the league in the wake of all the issues socially. How delicate a moment was that, George, for the National Football League to negotiate, not in the labor sense, their way through that? So what Damien's talking about, I want my 3 hours of the Jets or Giants. I don't need to see end racism stenciled in the end zone necessarily. I applaud the sentiment. I embrace it. But, that was a difficult journey, it seems.
Yeah. Oftentimes, we find ourselves in the very difficult position of being the yellow light or the red light as the union. And the risks over the last 10 years have not just been the off-field issues, health and safety issues, the player demonstrations, as you mentioned. We have tried at every turn to be that yellow light or that red light for the NFL. And the yellow light, when we were going through the President of the United States attacking one of our members and attacking the rights of players, to us it was a labor issue because we viewed it as everybody's rights at the workplace and what they meant in the context of what we were going through as a country. And I think if you fast forward to the George Floyd protests in America, that, I don't think, talking about the cultural impact of the NFL, I don't know that our players are as full-throated as they were in leading a lot of those demonstrations and being part of that movement if we hadn't sort of told the owners, just let this be, and the players have a right to voice their opinion and demonstrate and be part of something bigger than themselves. Whether people disagree with the sentiment or not, they have the right to do that, and I think that was really important.
But where does that sit today, though, in terms of, we would hear the stories of selected owners unhappy with the player activism, even before the summer of George Floyd, getting through the George Floyd moment in American history. And we're not through it, certainly. But where does that sit now in 2023 as far as, because of the turnover, for example, in union members, what's the average career? Is it still around 4 years?
Under 4 years.
So your population of union members, and Damien, you understand this, you had a blessed career of 11 years? 12 years, mm-hmm. Yeah. You're educating, are you attempting to educate members, or is the turnover such that you're not going to have the same sentiments and same opinions this year that you had 5 years ago?
I think, Wood jump in, but I think educating to us is paternalistic. We're trying to embrace what the players are about now. We are in the position now where players come in more informed about the business of the NFL than ever. They're in, for the most part, in locker rooms and colleges that are more sophisticated than many NFL locker rooms and professional workplaces. Have you guys seen pictures of LSU's and Ohio State's locker rooms compared to any NFL locker room? So from our vantage point as a union, it's to embrace the players' mentality and to harness that power. That's really what our position has been, as opposed to, the classic, education, know your rights type of stuff. We still do that, but it's done in a different way in terms of embracing where they're coming from.
Yeah, just to piggyback off George, like, the players that are coming into the league now, they are light years ahead of when I came into the league.
In terms of?
In terms of like business savvy, everything that goes into modern day players, social media, marketing, one-on-one, they are light years ahead of that. And so, when I came in the league, we had so many meetings with the union just to just talk about things on the ground floor. These guys now, they're hitting the ground running because they're already with the whole NIL and everything. Like, they already know all of that stuff. They already understand they have the business acumen already coming into this thing. So that's a big time advantage for a lot of these young guys. Now, the question is, now can you take advantage of that? Can you take it to the next level? Take it a step further. But you got to have everyone collectively be together, and George, you would say that's always been like the one thing about our league is make sure, because we have so many players, they turn over. Can you keep everybody
And the
together?
interest of rookies is different than veterans. The veterans feel like they're more self-assured in their careers. They kind of have a clear eye view of what it is that my goals are, a life after football. Rookies are coming in, younger players are just like, I'm trying to keep my job. And I think that's been the interesting thing as a reporter and a columnist over my career is when you talk about, Don, you talked about the difference in the NBA and NFL. Yeah, the NFL might be here, but NBA players have a lot more, they have a lot more agency as individuals and control over the league, it seems, as opposed to the NFL, just trying to get guys on one accord. Can we get together and make sure that we change things for the betterment of the whole? But I think Damien, your point about younger kids coming into the league now, they're just further ahead. This generation is different. Just overall,
What's the biggest difference that you see?
Young people are way more confident, way more self-assured, way more comfortable saying, that doesn't feel right to me. Don't really love that. And I think the NFL is, what has made the NFL interesting to cover is that it's about the shield. So you come into the league and it's like, hey, it's about the organization. It's about, hey, you're one of 53. Well, yeah, true, but I think younger generations they challenge things. It's not just, oh, that's the way we do it, okay. It's, no, I get that's how we do it. Make it make sense for me, though. And I'm curious, as time changes, will we see shifts in how NFL locker rooms and players operate?
We love that. As a union, we love that because we want to chisel away at everything that they're trying to sell you about welcome to the Patriots family. Because what family are we talking about here, right? A family that's going to underpay you, put you at risk, and then cut you when they're done? Like, that doesn't sound like a family to me, right? Whereas, for those of you who have followed any of the union issues, to Kimberly's point about young players versus veteran players, we have to walk that line between a young player who's like, I just want my bag.
Right.
And a veteran player who's thinking about what's my pension going to look like if I have health and safety issues down the road, or if I have, debilitating injuries from when I played football. And that is the biggest challenge that we have as a business, I think. Overall is, yes, we want to sell this Browns Mafia or Dog Pound or, Jets, whatever.
Bills Mafia,
My
Dog
bad.
Pound,
Thank you.
Jets Nation. Yeah.
ESPN correction over here. But we don't care about that. And I think the league's starting to figure out that we have to figure out a way to harness the power of the players.
And I would say this, just jumping off of what Kimberly talking about. I look at these young players; they're disruptors.
Yeah.
They're disruptors of the status quo.
If football is not given a disruption, though, is it? Football is a
Disrupt all
military
you want
mindset,
between the
it's
white lines,
organization, it's
but-
rigor.
It's rigid, it's structured, but these guys coming in now, they don't care about any of that stuff. If it doesn't feel right to them, they're not rolling with it. And honestly, that's exactly what's needed coming into the league. They need more young people to say, wait a minute, I don't care how long you guys been doing this. This is not right. And the more of them that band together and do those type of things, I think the more
That's the
change,
key.
the more
That's the
change. I'm not saying it's going to happen. Everything happens now, but incremental change can be, can happen.
We saw that with the last CBA, right? This last CBA was only approved by 60 votes, right?
Yeah.
It was that close.
Thanks for bringing me back to that.
I wrote an in-depth story about George's boss, which doesn't love, by the way. No, but it was, in large part, it was because guys on the practice squad voted. And just to talk about different thoughts when you're voting on your future, guys on the practice squad, they just want to make league minimum, right? They just want to play. And they had a vote. And so, yeah, it just shows you the split, even among the players on the last CBA, which is, it extend now for another decade. It almost didn't go through. It was that close. And obviously there were challenges because the vote was, as the pandemic just began. I'm sorry, George, I'm bringing you back to the...
No,
Flashbacks.
happy to talk about whatever, Don, please.
Well, but did that reality of a close vote for the CBA and for this energized young generation, George, how has that changed what the union leadership and management is your mission and what you're trying to do?
We have another long runway now, right? So we have another long runway, and we have additional concerns and risks that are ahead of us. You led with an introduction about gambling. What risks is that going?
Ladder.
That's a big one.
That's a big one. What risks is that going to bring to the business? There was talk about Thursday night football flexing, which is bonkers.
Yeah.
And Thursday Night Football itself is not bonkers?
Well, I mean,
It's absolutely bonkers.
but there's a trade-off to that,
Yeah.
right? So, at least from the, you can justify the Thursday night games by putting the piece of paper in front of our membership and saying this is X billion dollars in additional revenue. So you'll get the time off, and you try to build in protections on the front end, and you do the best you can. The bigger challenges, the existential challenges, I think, what health and safety issues are unforeseen that are going to come up? The rise of NIL. How is that going to impact partners and sponsors who have currently exclusive deals with the NFL, who are going to be potentially conflicted out because a young man coming into this league has an exclusive, I'm making it up, with Coke, when our league sponsor is Pepsi? Those are going to be the things that we have to carefully navigate. Thankfully, we've got another 9-10 year runway before the next labor fight, so hopefully we can work together on that. But there will be significant speed bumps along the way, trust.
It's a game of risk. It's an industry, though, that seems to not have a lot of risks, Don. Someone told me this, I believe it's true, so I'll say it in this academic setting, that the last sports franchise among the major leagues to sell at a loss was the Yankees when CBS sold to Steinbrenner back in the early 70s for $10 million. Since then, buying a sports franchise is like putting your money into U.S. savings bonds on steroids. What's the risk in owning an NFL franchise?
Zero risk.
Less than zero.
Less than zero. That's why everybody's lining up to buy them. I mean, NFL franchises now are for rich people, for billionaires. They're like an annuity. It's guaranteed money because there's fixed labor costs going forward for 9 years. Unlike any other major sports union, by the way, they're usually shorter than 10 years. So there's certainty there. There's certainty now with the television contracts, which are a bonanza of money. And Jerry Jones, when Jerry Jones bought the Dallas Cowboys in 1989 for $150 million, he was losing $1 million a month. It's hard to believe, in 1989, that late. His operational loss was $1 million a month when he owned the Cowboys that first year when they went 1-15, that first season when Jerry was the owner. Now the team is worth at least $8 billion, and he bought it for $150 million 34 years ago. He won't sell it. He has said on the record for less than $10 billion. He's never going to sell it. But if he were to sell it, he could get at least $10 billion for it, the Dallas Cowboys. And it's because of this avalanche of cash. It's a certainty. There's no risk whatsoever. You have Dan Snyder, the worst owner in the history, arguably, of American sports, bought his franchise in 1999 for $800 million. He's going to sell it for $6.05 billion. He owes about $1 billion to Bank of America. He is going to be the American that walks away with the largest pile of cash in American history by selling a sports franchise. And he was the worst owner. If
but there's a vanity value to that, though, Don. What you're talking about with Jerry not willing to sell his team for less than 10, let's be clear. There's no like street or market. This is not like a Wall Street analysis that we're doing here. There's the Wall Street analysis of what the equity value is of the clubs based off of, you know, for any of you who are finance geeks, we'll look in the books and do that evaluation and model it out. Then there's the vanity tax on top of it for these family-owned clubs who will never sell because Jerry wants forever to have the team be in his name, pass it on to his children, pass it on to their kids. I mean, how many family-owned teams are there? Quite a bit of family-owned clubs in the NFL still. So
There are, yeah. The Rooneys, the Hunts, yeah, there's many.
you know,
Arrows.
I have a hard time with the, this is not disagreeing with this, is agreeing with you. I have a hard time with the street value or the market value that we place on these clubs because what they sell for is what they sell for. And Dan Snyder sold only because somebody twisted his arm to sell. Let's be
No
candid.
doubt, no doubt about that. But my only point about Snyder is he did everything imaginable to turn that franchise into something that should be a lot less valuable than it is. But because, to your point, to your point about vanity, the vanity taxes, there's very few NFL franchises that go on the market because so many are family-owned. So when they do, and even the Commanders are 32nd in local revenue. I mean, think about that. They're in a top 5 marketplace. You know, George, you live there. There's so much money in the Washington, D.C. area, and the Commanders are last in revenue. They're playing in a stadium that's falling down, literally is falling down. And yet...
Actually on players, yes.
On
People.
players, right. On Hurts's head.
Yeah.
And so he's getting $6 billion. That's the reward he gets. And for me, that, more than anything that we could even say, really speaks to the power of the NFL. I mean, billionaires want in because there's guaranteed return on your investment like an annuity. There's no other business in America where you have that kind of guarantee. Maybe Apple, we talk about some of the trillion-dollar market cap companies, maybe. It's guaranteed money. It's remarkable.
What does that do to the pool of potential buyers when franchises come up for sale? Magic Johnson is said to be part of the group that's going to be purchasing the Washington franchise, the need for minority ownership to be involved, but he would not be the general partner as far as we understand the deal to be taking shape. So now you've shrunk the pool of, say, from 15 years ago, of people who might have enough money, and you can have, what, up to 24 limited partners, I believe, in the NFL. That's a short roster of people who can come up with that kind of financing and actual scratch. What does that... And yet the prices accelerate. It seems as if the laws of finance are held in abeyance here.
You're right. There's a limited number of people that can afford it. You also have to have a certain percentage of cash as well. There's very strict NFL rules about that as well. But, you know, there's going to be multiple bidders. I would predict in the next decade, any franchise that comes available, there will be multiple billionaire bidders that will, as we all know, you have leverage, the price goes up, the salary goes up, and I think we'll continue to see it.
Is it just the generational differences you talked about, Damien, about the kids coming, young men coming into the league now, or to see those franchise values that stokes the desire to like getting a larger piece of the pie?
Absolutely. I mean, these guys understand, and once this deal goes through with the Washington Commanders, these guys will know, like, wow, ownership is making money on a totally different level as us players. And players want to have the mindset of, well, people come to see us. They don't come to see Jerry Jones. They don't come to see Dan Snyder, they come to see us. So why wouldn't we want a bigger slice of the pie? That's the conversation is going to always, from a player standpoint, is going to always come to that. People come to see us play. We are the product. So we should have a bigger piece of it.
True, but this is, again, as a reporter and a former columnist and now on TV, talking about NFL players. Especially, Damien, you and I have sat on, whether it's First Take, Get Up, all these shows, for months talking about the Lamar Jackson situation. And you brought up the word about disruptors. These young players are more comfortable disrupting. However, my frustration in watching it is, are you disrupting with a plan, or are you just aggrieved, right? Because you had Kyler Murray, you've had Lamar Jackson still needs a deal, Jalen Hurts just got signed a deal, you've got Joe Burrow coming up, Justin Herbert coming up. And my question is, when I look at these contracts, it's clear that NFL owners don't want to do guaranteed deals, that Deshaun Watson was the outlier. But when you have a string of young, talented guys whose deals are up, selfishly, taking my reporter hat off, just looking at the optics of it, I would love if they had all said, you know what, 230, that's the floor.
And you know what, Kimberley? Here's the thing. This would have been the time to really, if the players, especially the quarterbacks, because we know the quarterbacks yield the most power.
Yeah.
This would have been the time, Bob. This would have been the time, because think about all the quarterbacks that either just signed or about to sign. You had, obviously, the Deshaun Watson deal. Kyler Murray.
Yep.
You had Russell Wilson.
Yep.
Jalen Hurts. Lamar Jackson. Joe Burrow, who's coming up, and Justin Herbert.
Coming up.
So you have all of these superstar young quarterbacks. Imagine if those guys had, I don't know, just kind of had a powwow and just said, guys, let's yield our power.
But doesn't that speak to the the power of the NFL and owners? Because look, Jalen Hurts, he just came off a Super Bowl. He outplayed Patrick Mahomes. He didn't get a Deshaun Watson deal. Like, that's still the outlier. So as much as these players may want to push the envelope.
Look, where's camera one? Camera one.
Hear me and hear me good.
Aspiring professionals in the room. All of this is about what you're willing to do or what you're willing to give up.
Yep.
That's it. That's the whole game of negotiations. Those of you in the audience who want to be in the media, be a sports agent, get into the business anywhere, negotiate a contract at any point, you're going to get into a negotiation at some point in your life over something significant that's going to impact you, much less $200 million of wealth that your family's never seen before. It all comes down to, either individually, what are you willing to do or not do to get that money, or what are you willing to give up? And that's on an individual level or a collective level. So what Wood's talking about is fascinating because there is an anti-collusion clause in the collective bargaining agreement that prevents NFL owners from colluding. We don't have that restriction. So all of the players you mentioned could actually, in theory, sit down, go play a round of golf, have a Arnold Palmer of their choice, and decide we're not signing for less than X. And you know what? I'm not showing up to camp. I'm not showing up to the first game unless we get X. That's how guaranteed contracts came about in every other sport. Larry Bird, for those of you who don't know, Larry Bird was the very first guaranteed contract in the NBA. He got technically less money than Moses Malone. But after Moses did his deal, Larry said, I'll take $1 million less, but I want the whole thing guaranteed. And everything from there became custom and practice. Just real life.
I don't know if the owners will do that. Even if there is this powwow, and I like your idea.
You have to make them do it.
You have to make them do it.
Yeah.
But even if you make them do it, I don't think the owners will necessarily guarantee contracts to the owners. They're never going to go there.
So let's play it out. What
Hey,
does
you know
what
it
does
better
Joe,
than
what
anybody.
does Mike Brown do if Joe Burrow doesn't show up to?
Well, that's why
No, I'm
this
serious.
run. That's why
a
this
fair
run is
question,
so
right?
critical, because you are seeing the best at the position, the most important position, and you have them coming up like ducks in a row. You talk about that would be the moment.
And I can tell you guys that the fury at Jimmy Haslam for
Oh,
signing
yes.
Deshaun Watson
Yeah.
for guaranteed money among all the other NFL owners was enormous.
Yes.
But you know what?
Yes.
Huge. Like, what are you doing?
And especially other owners feel like, well, just because Jimmy Haslam is dumb and is going to give this much money doesn't mean we have to be dumb. But at the same time, what I will say is that Jimmy Haslam at least showed me, think what you want about Deshaun Watson, but Jimmy Haslam at least showed me, you know what? I say I want to win by any means necessary, and damn it, I'm going to try to win by any means necessary.
But you know what, Bob? Here's the thing about, I brought up players banding together and all those type of things. But you know what the league banks on? They bank on everyone out here.
Yes.
Their love of the game of football. And the one thing about the league is a PR machine.
Oh, I didn't notice.
They are a PR machine, and they know how to navigate and use it to their advantage. So even we talk about a guy like, for instance, Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow has made the Cincinnati Bengals relevant. The Cincinnati Bengals, excuse my French, they were god awful. Like they were shit basically. No one gave a damn about the Bengals until Joe Burrow came along and turned their whole franchise around. And now Mike Brown is benefiting from that, of the Bengals being a relevant franchise. So, but on the flip side of that, not only does Mike Brown know this, but all the other owners know. We know we have a consumer base that's just thirsty for this product.
They're coming out no matter what, though,
They're
right?
coming out no matter what.
We had replacement players during the strike of 1987. It was 87 that was
yeah,
here.
87.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
absolutely true.
Taking people literally out of bus stations to play in the National Football League, and the games counted in the standings.
I have a leading question for Don.
Love it.
Okay, here we go.
And the NFL owners were mad at Jimmy Haslam. What were they saying to each other?
We're never going to do what he just did, which is collusion.
Which is collusion.
That's collusion. Has it happened since? No. Will it happen anytime soon? Very likely no. Unless somebody does, as you suggest. This is what Larry Bird did. I'll take less, but guarantee the money. Maybe, but I think even then, the guaranteed contracts is the Rubicon that owners do not want to cross it. You know it. You know it. You've been in these two CBAs. That was never on the table, was it? Ever?
Oh, but guaranteed I mean, I don't want to go down the overly academic road of guaranteed contracts, but no professional sports collective bargaining agreement has guaranteed contracts as part of their collective bargaining agreement. It's all based off of the individual negotiations between the athlete and the agent and the club. So it is 100% a non-starter. Our job as a union is to make as much money available to the players and try to give them as much leverage as possible. To that cap jump every year that happens, $10, $15 million, that gives them leverage to go out and say, hey, we know there's money out there. We are forcing you to spend it in cash. Pay me.
But then the owners will say, hey, the difference between the NBA and the NFL is we have 53 guys on the active roster. We've got even more guys. Like, hey, Joe, if we give you $235, that's a lot less in the kitty for somebody else. I mean, and now we can't put together a winning team for you to win Super Bowls. Like, that's what they end up doing.
Bob, this is the crazy thing about this whole situation. You literally have NFL teams out here that are trotting out Joe Blow as quarterback, that don't have a prayer in the world of winning anything. And you have Lamar Jackson, who was a unanimous league MVP, who owns the third best winning percentage since coming into the league when he did, I think it was 2018 or whatever it was?
2018,
2018. Third winningest quarterback in the league, not one offer sheet from anybody.
Why? Why do we think?
His owner, Bisciotti, came out and said, yeah, I'm not trying to do any Deshaun Watson deals. So if your own owner, who loves you dearly, is saying, yeah, we're not going down the Deshaun Watson route,
But just think of how crazy that
yeah,
is.
yeah.
Like we say all the time, this is a quarterback-driven league, and it is. You can't win a Super Bowl if you don't have a big-time quarterback. And here it is, where a 26-year-old former unanimous league MVP hasn't even gotten one offer sheet. One. If that doesn't speak to the league, I don't know what else it is.
Well, in the next breath, Mike Brown would make money no matter who's quarterbacking his team.
He
would he
would,
not? I mean,
yes.
viscerally, emotionally,
Yes.
vanity-wise, yes, we want to win. But that franchise, they will get their TV check. They will
Right.
get, yes, sponsor revenue internally in the local market. But so does it really matter if Joe Burrow, in a financial sense, in the macro sense, perhaps it's a wash, right?
Yeah, I will say they did do the new name on their stadium in preparation for Joe Burrow, I believe. But you're right.
He finally took Daddy's name off the
Yes, because he knew that I need to pay Joe Burrow and I got to pay Jamar Chase. But ultimately, your point stands. He's going to make money hand over fist regardless of who's that quarterback, because that's the power of the league.
And the question becomes, is the ultimate goal to win, or is it to compete but still make money? Like that's the
What do you think? How many owners will, like the old Ed Bartolo Jr., who spent money before the days of the salary cap left and right to win, how many have that swaggering sense now, and how many are just saying, let's get our collective money here, let's get the guaranteed cash, we'll do what we can within reason?
I think the fact that, to Damien's point about the fact that Lamar Jackson is still sitting out there, and I understand the offer sheet complicates things because another team does all the work, comes up with the contract, and then the Ravens say, oh, thank you. You did the legwork for us. We'll just sign him to that, and you just set the market for him. The draft picks and all that. But again, when you think about the type of special dynamic player that Lamar is, and for not even just that division, the AFC North, but the AFC as a whole, for him just to be out there, and you've watched so many teams struggle with quarterbacks, trying to find the quarterback. The fact that the Jets are in on Aaron Rodgers, and even though Lamar is available, have said, no, we're not even looking at Lamar. It's Aaron all the way, even though we're not sure if he's going to be around after this year. It's just mind-boggling. So, Bob, to your question of which is it, do they want to win or not? I think some teams want to win, but I think there are a lot of organizations over the years that I've seen, we just want to be competitive. Because we just want to be competitive every year, because that's how we stay in business, we keep our jobs, we still make the money, and we still look like we're trying, but we're not going to go the extra Jimmy Haslam route.
We keep our jobs in the executive suite. We'll go through coaches like Jim Socks, but it won't matter.
And Don, here's a thing for you. You spoke about the Washington Commanders being up for sale. Myself and many others have said, why wouldn't the Commanders be in on Lamar Jackson? And think about it. You're in the same media market as the Baltimore Ravens. You're selling the team. What better way to raise the profile of a team that you're selling than having a marquee quarterback? Now, there's no guarantee that you would be able to ultimately put together an offer sheet and the Ravens would reject it, but to not even try, and your team is up for sale, to me, that's lunacy. That doesn't even make any sense. I thought the Washington Commanders would have been like one of the first teams to say, you know what? Let's put together an offer sheet because we're in the same media market as the Baltimore Ravens.
Is there a question of escrow?
Dan
where the money
Snyder
has to go?
said before he decided to sell the team, he decided to sell the team last November, forced to, basically. But before that, he said, all I need is a marquee quarterback and all my problems will be solved. I think once he made that decision, he's out. He's not looking for anything. It's not going to enhance the value of his team, really, when you think about it, if he signs Lamar Jackson to an offer sheet. It's not. At this point, it's just, I'm going to let the process take its course. I've got multiple bidders that are interested. Bank of America is heading this up. They're already in my ballpark at $6 billion. Why get involved?
I'd like to point out we are going to begin in a few moments taking questions from the audience. We've got the microphone over here and one over here. So if you have a question, queue up, and we'll get to you. We're going to cover a topic or two more, but please make your way over to the microphones. I wanted to pick up on something in two words that you talked about public relations, the juggernaut, Woody, that is the National Football League in terms of public relations sense, and also the risk. But we talked about risk in terms of financial risk. I want to talk about risk in terms of playing the game, and take us back to the emotional, wrenching, and instructive near tragedy of Damar Hamlin's experience, the player on Monday Night Football for the Buffalo Bills who nearly died on the field. And as we learned recently, it was commotio cordis, the blow to the chest at the exact moment that the heartbeat had the interval that almost cost him his life that night. As a player, as a former player, well, I know you were watching it live. I can't imagine what it was like. As you processed that night and in the days and weeks since, what do you take from all of that?
Man, that, you know, so I just want to explain to people, as far as football is concerned, we're programmed to, even when guys get hurt, you hear a phrase say, move the drill. Just move the drill. I mean, I've seen it all. I've seen compound fractures where, it's just a gruesome injury, ACLs, all the stuff, and nobody blinks an eye. There's compassion, but got to move the drill. Got to keep it going. When Damar Hamlin, when that situation played itself out on the field, you could clearly tell from the player's reaction, this was not an injury. This was a health-related matter. And when I saw the emotions on the players on the field, it scared the hell out of me at home. It was such a surreal moment watching that whole thing play out. And as players, we're just programmed that, sometimes people don't even look at us as human. We're viewed as gladiators. We should be able to play through anything instead of, man, these guys, we're human as well. It's hard to play through stuff like that, and obviously with that event happening, neither sides were in a mentally or emotional capacity to go out there and finish that game, and for obvious reasons. But to see Damar Hamlin, the whole situation play itself out from the days, the weeks, months afterward. We're a brotherhood. We're a brotherhood. Players are a brotherhood. I always say we're a special fraternity. There's not that many guys that played in the National Football League in its entire history. And at the end of the day, yeah, we might play against each other for 3 hours, but once those 3 hours are up, we care about one another. We care about each other's, our families hang out together, all those type of things. And for, myself and obviously Damar Hamlin's brothers all across the league, to watch his recovery was a huge sigh of relief, because we've never seen anything like that, Bob. We've never seen anything like that happen on the football field where a guy literally, let's just be honest, he died on the field and he was resuscitated. And it's just been a very emotional journey. I know it's been emotional for Damar Hamlin, but it's been emotional for a lot of people, watching this situation play itself out.
And cleared to come back to attempt to resume his career. We talked about controlling the narrative in a PR sense. And George, there was an award given Damar at the Super Bowl, voted by players, but also the league had him front and center on the Super Bowl pregame telecast. We see him here in that overhead shot there with the president. We applaud the fact that there were so many protocols in place, that medical care was there. Absent that, in all likelihood, we would have a different conversation. when you reflect on the message, the takeaway message from that from the National Football League, George, what do you see?
I still have a hard time talking about it, candidly. On one hand, those protections that you mentioned and the response was in place because of the union's advocacy for emergency medical protocols and our insistence on having defibrillators nearby and ambulances and all of the things. Even the doctors who were on the sidelines for that Monday night game were qualified in that type of response and recovery because of what we advocated for the players. So on the one hand, super proud of that. On the other hand, there is this sort of, Wood talked about the family, and I feel like now, having been at this role for 14 years now, I'm entrenched with the players and their families, and I know that a lot of their friends and families go to the game not just to cheer for them and to support them and to wear their jerseys, but there's a part of them that worries, is my brother, son, husband father going to walk off the field this Sunday or Thursday night or Monday night? And I have a hard time framing it as a PR thing, because I have a very sober view of what our job is as a union, and I know that, yes, Damar was voted on but it was because of the work that he had done in the community before his incident. He was in that mix. Nobody should get it twisted. We should not be glorifying, in my opinion, the risks that players take to play this game. In my opinion, that should not be glorified. It is a reality. It is something serious that we all have to deal with as a business, and Would you played, like you have to deal with it mentally as a player. But none of us should be trivializing, in my opinion, or glorifying the fact that, yeah, he died and he's coming back. Like, we're not just, it's not biblical Lazarus, like, stuff.
Yet, Don, even in the moments after Damar was being worked on the field, there was uncertainty at that moment at the game, whether it would continue, whether the telecast, how it would be covered. Immediately, the league was presented with something that, God forbid, could have been the worst thing imaginable.
Roger Goodell has told people around him. I did a profile of the commissioner, I think 10 years ago this year, 10 years ago this spring, and I had a Hall of Fame quarterback tell me that Roger Goodell has said his biggest fear is a player dying on the field. The optics of that, what it would do to the business. And so Roger Goodell's worst fear happened that night in Cincinnati. As you say, Hamlin was dead and had to be resuscitated. And in the minutes after that, I did a story back in January about how the league handled it moment by moment, and they wanted to keep playing.
Yes, you saw those guys warming up.
They were warming up. They were on both sidelines. And Joe Buck told a national television audience on Monday Night Football, 5 minutes before starting.
Yep.
That was put in his ear by the league office at their headquarters. And it took the coaches and the players to get together and say, we are not going back out there.
And us.
And the union. It's true. George's boss, DeMaurice Smith, the head of the NFLPA, had a conversation with the commissioner. I reported that in the story as well. But the impulse is the game must go on. Even seeing that, and we all, we all reacted the way you did, like, how do you play another down? But it took about an hour, a little under an hour, I think, 56 minutes, before finally the league came around and agreed with what the players and the coaches insisted on. It was literally, I was told, a ground-up decision from the players and the coaches there who did the right thing. The league's impulse was to keep playing.
And this is an image from the Oval Office that certainly celebrates his health, his return, and who does not endorse that and embrace it in your heart. But at the same time, there's a political calculation to that picture, and there's a message behind it that the takeaway when you hear Damar Hamlin, and well, it should, is a great young man who's accomplished much in his life. And yet, that's the league narrative.
Because I remember even tweeting, I know they're going to play this game. I just don't know how they're going to be able to. Because I was a columnist in Buffalo the first year that Brandon Beane became GM and Sean McDermott became head coach. So I've been in Buffalo a lot. Like, I know those guys. I don't know Damar Hamlin personally, but watching Sean McDermott's face on TV is when I knew, oh no. Because I know Sean, I know his countenance, I know how he is normally. And I credit, in that moment, I never had more respect for Sean and Zach Taylor, the Cincinnati Bengals coach. They are wonderful at what they do as coaches. But in that moment, for them to put their guys ahead of all of it, like, that was a moment to me that it's still, like, I could still see it all, and I was just at home. I can't imagine if I was actually covering that game, because why I love this job of covering the NFL is because I love being able to showcase the human side of guys. I like being able to tell their stories. That's why I want to be a writer, and give the public a chance, because we don't get to see their faces a lot of times unless you're a high-profile quarterback. The public doesn't necessarily know who's Damar Hamlin, So that's why I love covering the NFL, because they are brilliant, wonderful guys that play this game. And in that moment, it still felt like, oh, well, yeah, this guy is being wheeled off in an ambulance, but we still got to get back to business. And it took the head coaches, to your point, of saying, we're just not.
There was a remarkable moment when Zach Taylor, the head coach of the Bengals, and Sean McDermott, the head coach of the Bills, were together on the sideline, and they covered their mouths, the way pitcher will do with a catcher.
Yep.
So you can't read their lips. And what they were saying behind it is, we're getting off the field. But they covered their mouths. They didn't want maybe the league office to see what they were discussing, because it was that bold a move in that moment, because they were flaunting Park Avenue.
Because Stephon Diggs was trying to hype up guys. Like, you saw, I don't know if it was Burrow or Josh Allen, one of the QBs started throwing, and you saw,
Joe Burrow.
Team leaders trying to,
in a
get
game
guys
dripping
up.
with playoff implications too, which we forget
Yes.
perhaps in the next spring.
It's just bringing it back to the PR aspect. Think about this. Don mentions that it took almost an hour for the league to call it, and the guy basically died on the field. And now to spin it forward from a league's perspective, look at the PR that they've put into it, where you literally forget that whole aspect of it. The night of, where they wanted to play the game, they basically wanted to force the players to continue to play that game.
You remember that Paul Tagliabue declared the league would take a week after 9/11. You remember the worst mistake Pete Rozelle, the original, well, not the original, but the most effective early commissioner of the NFL in 1963. They played the Sunday after John Kennedy was killed in Dallas. So.
And he said it was the worst decision he made as
he lived with
commissioner.
that for the balance of his years. Time for questions. We'll start at this mic. Please step up, identify yourself, and direct a question. Let's go.
Sorry. My name is TJ Denault. I'm a sports management and marketing major with a minor in journalism here at Seton Hall, and I have a question regarding player safety. So my question is, do you think the NFL has done a sufficient job enough showing that their actions speak louder than their words, that they care about player safety, and that they're showing that they really do care?
It's never enough. It is an inherently dangerous game, but when you look at the overwhelming majority of the health and safety protections players, I even am reticent to use the word enjoy, but that players have playing the game, it's because their union advocated for it. It took us 2.5, 3 years to advocate for concussion protocols in the NFL. We're currently in the midst of advocating for safer playing surfaces, because the data shows that there are artificial surfaces that have significantly higher injury rates than natural grass surfaces do. So it is never enough for, because As soon as you catch up with one issue, you identify another one. Are players wearing the safest possible cleats, given the data we have on lower extremity injuries? Are they using the right pads, given the advancement in technology that we have with respect to force, impact, torque for how players are playing the game in the modern day? How does that impact everything from, mouth guards to hydration to you name it? So I've just sort of off the top of my head listed, a dozen or so health and safety issues that are live. The question again becomes not, is the league or the owners willing to protect the players? It's, do they have an effective union to advocate on their behalf? And are the players bought in?
Can I say it's not just physical? Like this whole conversation about the Damar Hamlin situation, the idea that these players still had it in their head, like we still have to play after that, it's not just physical, like mental health, the fact that it took an hour, like that is all part of, are we really caring about our players like we should? Are we in the moment, like some things have to supersede business and finances, and I understand the playoffs and all that, but physical, but also mental. Like look at them as three-dimensional whole humans like you would look after anybody else.
That whole focus on mental health is something where all sports are understanding we need to spend more time and effort and focus on. Question from this mic. Identify yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Miles Curry. I'm a sophomore here at Seton Hall University. First, I would like to thank you guys for coming and taking time out of your busy schedules to be here on our campus today. So Mrs. Kimberley Martin brought up a point today that I thought was interesting. It's the ideal that an NFL franchise can't win a Super Bowl with its quarterback taking up a majority of its cap. And while I never really agree with the ideal, it kind of showed true throughout NFL history. Sadly, since I've been alive, the New England Patriots have won most of the Super Bowls, and obviously Tom Brady wasn't making that much of the Patriots cap. But recently, with the last two Super Bowls, Patrick Mahomes and Matthew Stafford both made up a good majority of their team's cap. So I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts on on that, and how it seems now that it's turned to it's more important to figure out the coaches and everything around the quarterback, and that you can still win a Super Bowl with a quarterback being that big.
As players, we talk about this all the time, and you know what we say? Don't ever let the organization off the hook. This whole notion of quarterbacks eating up all the cap space is baloney. Okay, cap jumps up, every 3 years, 30%. It's 30%. Every 3 years, the cap just skyrockets over a short period of time. And I've always said it's not up to the players to figure it out. Okay, if you go out there and you play well, and you deserve that contract that you're trying to negotiate, it's up to the front office and the coaching staff to go out there and draft and develop guys. It's not up to the players. The players shouldn't take a penny less than what they deserve. It's the onus is on the team to figure out the pieces of the puzzle, because if you want to pay me to be a GM as well, by all means, I'm down. I'm down for that. But it's up to the organization to figure all that other stuff out.
Sir, your question, please.
Hi, I'm Matthew Madonna, a junior sport management major. Just want to thank you guys for being here. My question is back to Lamar Jackson. Damien, you pointed out how surprised you are that he has no offers, but Kimberley, I think you pointed out the inherent problem that no team wants to do the legwork of the negotiating to not actually receive the player. So I'm wondering from a union perspective what you think of the franchise tag and how you want to give the players their bargaining power back.
Yeah, the franchise tag has been in place since 1993. And again, it's a question of balancing that one issue that impacts an average of, over the last 15 years, 5 players every year directly, versus the other priorities that you have as a union to negotiate over what will be a $100 billion CBA, right? So for Lamar, it has hindered his ability to get what he deserves or what he feels like he deserves. But for a player like Kirk Cousins,
Ooh. I was in Washington. I was like, yeah, he did pretty well.
he flipped the franchise tag into a $90 million fully guaranteed contract. So it's all about how the perspective of where you are, I think, really defines how you look at a particular issue. So let me flip it around. Would you play, if you were in my shoes, would you advise the players to play an 18th game to get rid of the franchise tag?
No.
Would you advise the players to take on a Thursday night flex schedule to take the franchise tag away?
Absolutely not.
So then you weigh, would you advise the players to go on strike to get rid of the franchise tag?
Well, it's important for the players to have their negotiating power in contracts, and strike is one of their rights to in collective bargaining, and that's just something you have to weigh, you know?
So if the singular issue for a group of roughly 2,200 active NFL players is to get rid of a franchise tag that impacts 5 players, how successful do you think that strike is going to be?
It could be unsuccessful, but I think it goes back to what we're talking about, the power of the NFL. The owners are able to hold this over the players, and you know, as Damien pointed out, it's up to the players to kind of come together and try and get that power back, because the players don't have any negotiating leverage with this franchise tag, which is something for collective bargaining. Like as a union, that's what you want to get. Like you say, you want to make the most money available for all these players, and these franchise tag, Lamar's at the point where he's going to receive no money because he's not going to be able to sign anything that he feels that he's worth.
Well, he won't receive no money. He just won't receive the money that he feels like he deserves or he's.
He'll receive less than Daniel Jones. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If he holds out, then he will receive no money.
Yeah, but that would also be an exercise in leverage, right?
Yeah.
So going back to the power dynamics at play, our job as a union, and I'll just sort of cut to the Cliff's Notes, it's called a collective bargaining agreement because you're negotiating over a 500-page document over multiple issues. So if you want to, or anybody, it's not just picking on you, but if people want to cherry pick one issue that is the fly in the ointment issue and think that that is going to be a rallying cry to exercise maximum leverage for the collective players to get rid of it, I'm just telling you that is a very, very uphill climb. What was the issue in 2011? Commissioner discipline, neutral arbitration, right? That was the sore eye that everybody on ESPN was talking about, was Roger Goodell as judge, jury, executioner in the NFL. We got to the bargaining table and we said, hey guys, what are you willing to give up or what are you willing to do for that singular issue? Impacts 5 guys a year, forget it. We'll fight them, we'll sue them, we'll make them look bad going to the PR fight. Not worth going on strike for. That's a player decision. That's not a union staff decision.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Your question, please.
Hello, my name is Christopher Benitez Cuartas. I am a sophomore, double majoring in journalism and Catholic studies, minoring in diplomacy. First and foremost, thank you to all 5 of you for coming to give this panel. I have 2 questions regarding the NFL and its position as an important aspect of American culture and its role overseas. Firstly, I was wondering, how did the NFL get this global stretch started, this stretch of having games being held abroad, several games, and establishing a fan base? And secondly, how does the NFL respond to foreign political situations abroad, and how does it consider to either affect or be affected by the international image of the United States?
First international games. I'm trying to remember what the first games were in Mexico.
I thought it was Mexico City. Right?
Mexico City.
Yeah.
Then that went into hiatus for a few years, and then the concentrated games in England, and then this past year in Germany. And clearly the impetus there is build a new consumer base, build I mean, Where'd they play at not Tottenham's? Whose stadium they played? Was it
Tottenham
Tottenham? It was
Hotspur.
Tottenham Hotspur. Yeah.
And Wembley.
Sold
and they've
it
been at
out.
Wembley,
Yeah.
I was there.
They sell it.
Singing to "Take Me Home, Country Roads" in Frankfurt, I think.
Yeah.
This year. One of the more bizarre things you've ever seen.
Yeah, let me try to take on the first part of the question. I know it's been a big goal of Roger Goodell, and I think even prior to Goodell, Paul Tagliabue, his predecessor, to grow the game globally. And to do that, you put games over there. I lived in London from 2003 to 2005. I became a huge Premier League fan then. But even then, this is 20 years ago, there was a huge thirst for the NFL there. Britain is a big gambling culture, has a big gambling culture. There were people in the UK didn't even know that much about the NFL, betting on NFL games, and they were on Sky Sports live constantly. And so I think the NFL, being very smart, always looking to tap new revenue streams, said, let's grow the game globally. And the Jacksonville Jaguars in particular have really made it almost, they've given up one of their home games regularly. Shad Khan, the owner, has put games of the Jaguars frequently in London. And so it's a strategy, and we've seen it with Mexico City and Germany, and it will continue. And the game has grown exponentially in Europe in particular over the last 10 or 15 years. Your second question's a really good one that I'm being honest, I don't know the answer to it, but I would love to try to figure that out, about how politics, issues that occur abroad, how that impacts the thinking of the NFL in whether they're going to even go there. Probably not would be my gut feeling about it. I don't remember any instance, actually, come to think of it, where the NFL has weighed in, right, Bob, on a foreign issue, something that occurred in London where they would weigh in. I mean, they're loath to do it in the United States.
I mean, if they wanted to make a statement, they could put a game in Poland right now, real close to the Ukrainian border, and actually might have legs, or would have maybe 7 or 8 months ago before the fracture became here domestically, politically on that issue.
But that's more the NBA's brand than the NFL, but an excellent question. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, your question.
Hi, how you doing? My name's Sebastian Salazar. I'm a marketing major from Kane University. So for me, just for player safety purposes, now with all the gambling issues, Jamison Williams going down this year, Jamison Williams, 5 other players. Last year we had a player go down. What's the NFLPA doing to ensure that there aren't any gambling addictions going on moving forward? How can we ensure player health safety? And for Damien Woody on a player side, there's not a lot of big guys in the league. We got a lot of guys that come in and out. How do we make sure that their player health and safety are regulated throughout the whole gambling addiction circumstances?
You mean specifically threats on players?
Yeah, the threats for a player, not even gambling towards NFL games, but just at a general level. Any sports games, now that they have that ability to do it, how do you regulate that? How do you make sure you can provide services for the players that, are enough?
The services part is an easier one to answer than the protection part, because I don't even know how you would go about, this is where the international thing, to dovetail off of your point about going abroad, we've learned a lot from our partner unions in the UK about how they deal with the gambling issue. They happen to have an incredibly sophisticated regulatory body that oversees that, so that even if they get any irregularity, they're on top of it before the situation even happens. I think we have a long way to go and a lot of lessons to learn still in our business before we've sort of jumped into this pool halfway full, in my opinion. But I think the player safety aspect is something we've been actively talking to members of Congress about it, actively talking to regulators about it, actively talking to the league about it, and beyond the education part and the providing services to players, candidly, I'm not sure there's much more the union can do on that front.
There are very scary, though, full-throated threats against some players on social media, right? If a player blows a game, I've seen this not just in the NFL, but in other sports. Is that what you're referring to, where there's threats
We
Yeah,
report all those, to be clear. Like, we flag them and we report them to the authorities, and we work with the league and the authorities to sort of suss those out. Is that, to Don's point, sorry, is that the heart of your question?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm talking about. And like in the 80s, the NFL had gambling rights too at that point too. So just like looking back in time, and now it's kind of set in place again. But now we have the digital world to worry about. So I mean, it's just more free space to do a thing like that. So.
I mean, it's a little terrifying. Like, it just
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
Interesting, in the UK, I think within the last 10 days, I recall seeing that the EPL will sunset gambling ads on their jerseys, which is astonishing. And so much of the signage that you've seen for the last 10, 15 years is aimed at the Asian gambling market as well. And I don't know if they're going to sunset
They're going
that.
the opposite direction of the way we are here in the United States.
Thank you. I hate to be the hall monitor. We've got time for 2 more questions, one here and one here, because we are on literal train schedules, and our guests have been more than generous with their time. And your question, sir.
Hi, my name is Cameron Philpart. I'm an MBA student here at Seton Hall with a focus in sports management. I was just told to be an NFL insider here. My fellow NFL insider, Dr. Daniel, just informed me that the Aaron Rodgers trade did go through a few minutes ago. I was just told.
I have no service in here.
Really?
That's wonderful.
No
You got
service.
scooped!
I have
According
no
to whom?
service
Really
in here.
got scooped!
I can't send text right now.
What's the source?
Yeah. Well, that's what my phone is on silent, and all of a sudden now I'm getting all of these. Yeah.
Oh, my Lord.
Oh, man.
You know what? I'm
Good
gonna have to
scoop. Hey, we got that on video, right?
Good.
There you go.
I expect my contract from ESPN tomorrow. Apparently, the deal is a number 15 overall pick and a 2023 fifth-round pick for Aaron Rodgers, and then the Packers would receive a 2023 second round, a sixth-round pick, a conditional 2024 second round, if Aaron Rodgers plays 65% of the plays. That has nothing to do with my question, by the way, but I was just told to report.
That's better than, well, we had, as Jane mentioned earlier, the Brittany Griner panel in December, and she was released from a Russian prison about 15 hours later. Our timing's a little bit better here. Right?
That's
Released to
wonderful.
the prison
'cause
of
I
the
said on
Jets,
TV
though, is
today,
another
this is
story.
gonna have my Friday, so I'm very glad.
For you.
Yay!
Oh yeah.
Okay, it's official?
Oh, it's official,
What source
yeah.
and official? Do you have a question?
I do. That was not my question.
Good opening.
That's a great opening.
Very good opening.
Thank you. I try my best. George, you had mentioned that the case of the owners colluding against players like Lamar Jackson from getting guaranteed contracts was an issue. I remember in November there was a grievance filed by the NFLPA. I was wondering if you could detail anything about that. I know DeMaurice Smith said he couldn't detail anything back in February. And then to the panel as a whole, what do you all think would be the impact of a decision either way, whether it be in favor of the NFLPA or against them? What do you think the impact would be overall?
Well, it's a great question, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to usurp my boss and talk about the collusion case, even though he said he couldn't. No, I'm not going to do that.
That'd have been real breaking news.
There have been reports of a collusion case filed, which is why I asked my leading question to Don about enterprising journalism to find out what may have been or said between those owners at certain meetings. So we'll find out. We'll find out. We suspect that there has been some discussions about that particular contract publicly. At least we've seen that. What the impact will be, these things do take a lot of time and a lot of speed bumps in those cases.
It's a high burden of proof, too, isn't it?
Extremely high.
It can be.
Because it took
It
baseball
can be,
a long
unless-
time to get
no,
there.
but unless there's unless there.
Somebody's stupid enough to put it in writing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
Are
we've
the
seen in
damages
NFL.
trebled?
We've seen.
We've seen it in the NFL, Bob.
We've seen
Yeah,
John Gruden. We've seen.
Are the
sorry.
damages trebled for if there is? Okay, just like baseball back in the 80s. Sir, you've got the honor.
Great. Dominic Demini. I'm actually a proud alumni of Seton Hall University, and thank you all for being here today. And thank you, Jane, for posting this on LinkedIn. That's how I found out about it.
Yeah,
So,
Jane.
There you go, Jane.
Sports is dear to my heart because I work for Microsoft. I run the sports practice there, the NFL being one of the accounts that I'm responsible for. Surface on the sideline, the blue box, that's us. With all of the hype that's going on now in media and technology, and this is a general question for the panel there, How do you believe streaming has changed the fan experience today, and how you think it will change down the road?
Well, streaming is the reality, right? It's broadcasting now. And so
Everything is right here.
if it doesn't fit on your phone, it doesn't fit into your life, right?
And when it works, unlike with the Love is Blind reunion, it's wonderful. Streaming is great when it works. But think about it, I know a lot of people who have had season tickets, and they've just said, you know what, it's easier just to watch it. It's a more fun experience just watching it in my house, or I can be anywhere, usually, and you can get, you can see whatever you want. Like the fact that I thought this year was interesting with Amazon, and Thursday night it was like, people were like, do I even have Prime? Like, how do I get Amazon to see these games? Like, that's the wild thing to me, especially now that I'm on television. It's the first time I've ever been on television. Now we're talking about digital and moving away from TV. It's like, okay. But I think all of it is great for the traditionalist in me thinks it's great, because you want people to have access on the go wherever to be able to see these sporting events, to see whatever it is that they want. But it's weird because even watching TV, to me, watching the games on television is better than watching on my phone, personally. And the idea that stadiums are being revamped and all these things to make the experience better, do people go to games as much?
Well, the one thing I was talking about is now you're seeing in these stadiums, especially these newer stadiums, they want it, number one, the Wi-Fi is going to, that's got to be the number one thing. They're starting to put sports books in stadiums.
Yep.
Fantasy football is huge. I work on a fantasy football show every Sunday morning. Kimberley knows. And that is huge. And just for fantasy football, I just got started with it maybe a couple years ago. It is probably the biggest thing that's affiliated with the NFL. Fantasy football. I get more questions when I'm out and about, especially during football season. People trying to set their lineups. What about this guy, his injury? It's a phenomenon. And these NFL teams in their stadiums, they gotta make that a big deal in order to draw people to the stadium, because why would you want to leave home when you got everything right there for you? You don't have to worry about sitting in a line at the bathroom. You got at home, you got that locked down. TV, fantasy football. So it's just interesting to see how these NFL teams, the types of things they're doing at these stadiums now to entice people to come watch these games live.
The one negative, I agree the streaming is wonderful. The one negative is for a fan who does not have a lot of money, particularly in baseball. It's less with the NFL, although the NFL, we have the YouTube deal now with NFL Sunday Ticket. That's through the roof, right? I think it's $489 with the Red Zone channel,
What's up with Yankee games being on Apple?
Right, so now with MLB, and Commissioner Rob Manfred has a big problem, because Major League Baseball games, if you're a fan of the Yankees, you're a fan of the Cardinals, there's blackouts, there's so many different streaming choices, right? There's Apple Plus on Friday night, that package. So so you have to subscribe to Apple. There's Peacock now with Sunday morning games. You have to subscribe to that if your team is playing on that Sunday morning. So streaming is, as the cable is being cut, the cord is being cut, now there's this proliferation of so many options, and it hits a fan who doesn't have a lot of money in the pocketbook very hard.
And of course, the ownership and the leadership's not sitting around worrying about those people. They're worrying about more streaming partners, YouTube TV,
more
Peacock. We have hit the red zone here of our own. I wish we had time just to talk about the entire introduction of legal gambling and where that's all heading next time. George, Kimberly, Don, Damien, thank you all. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching online.
Oh, yeah.